Hello, welcome to this live tutorials on how to pattern, hack, wrap dresses. If you haven't met before, I'm Charlotte, I'm a pattern cutter, designer and also teacher. Welcome to my channel. I'm glad you joined me. And if you are watching, do please give me a little thumbs up so YouTube knows to direct people to have a look at wrap dresses. And for today, I've got 10 variations on wrap dresses, and you can either use them to draft your own, or of course you can use an existing sewing pattern you already have. And I'm going to give options both for a woven wrap dress and also a jersey knit dress, because there's slightly different considerations and slightly different methods as well. So I'd love to know, are you a fan of wrap dresses? Do let me know in the comments. And of course, they are a timeless style from throughout, but definitely 20th century, and I think before as well. And I'm going to say hello to a chat. Hello, Natalie. Yes, last week you can hear I got a cold, and I was also away for a few days in Derbyshire, and also in Staffordshire, and we went to Chatsworth House. And if you are like me, a fan of Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice, that's where in both the film and the BBC adaptation, where filmed Pemberley is based on it, and it's even better in real life. But it made me rewatch the Pride and Prejudice film with Keira Knightley. I didn't have enough to rewatch a whole TV series, but she wears a wrap dress as well, so it was very fitting. But it's a beautiful place to go, and a beautiful part of the country too. And hello Beth, good morning, and good afternoon, and hello Maria, buenos dias, and hello Susanna, hello. Oh, and Susanna is in Rome, of course. Congratulations, and have a great time in Rome. And hello Maria, hello. So let's have a look at some wrap dresses. Let me turn the cameras over. Actually, there we go. And afterwards, I'm going to put some links on where you can learn how to draft your own wrap dresses with me, because I've got a whole collection on different wrap styles, and also of course lots of Claire McCardle dresses, because she is probably the queen of wrap dresses. And I have a dress I drafted inspired by one of her own, but I'm sadly far too cold to wear it today. But if you followed me for a while, you know which one I mean. And Natalie says, I would love to see Chatsworth, and I love the Pride and Prejudice TV series. No, it's even better in real life. And yes, it's a fantastic reason to revisit the BBC series. It's such a nice TV series. Okay, and let's have a look. So you can see I have drawn out two different wrap dresses. And wrap dresses in general is what we call any dress where, rather than having a center front, plain or unfold, we wrap it round. So we have the back as one piece, and then the front opens up. And I'm actually going to show an example. Sorry for the quick disruption. This is the wrap dress, the Claire McCardle wrap dress I drafted and also made a construction guide for on my website, which is available. But you can see a wrap dress is any dress we call there. You basically open it up to get in and out, and then it wraps around your body. And there's lots of versions, and of course it can also be in the back. But in general, we always have a solid back, and then the front is wrapped round, or vice versa. So in theory, even like something like a dressing gown is a wrap style as such, but that allows for lots of pattern hacking or design variations to play around with. And there's two fabrics, of course, which are famous for wrap dresses. One is to use woven fabrics, which means we will have to add some shaping, and the other one is knit fabrics. And the main difference is, of course, is that with woven fabrics, we need to add darts or pleats or gathers to actually make it move around our 3D body. For knit, the knit does the work for that. So they're normally knit dresses. I always think of DVF, Diane von Furstenberg. They're sort of skin tight quite often, and the jersey allows it to wrap around the body. The other difference is that this jersey, of course, we still want the main jersey to stay on the straight of grain, because the knit already does all the fitting around the body. With woven, the beauty about a lot of wrap dresses is that we can switch the straight of grain to our wrap, which means the bodices end up roughly on the bias, which means it fits really nice. And these come from a time before spandex and stretch and stuff. So by switching something on the bias makes it much more comfortable to wear, which makes a really great all-day dress, which is of course what Claire McCardle, that's why she used it, because she made practical and beautiful dresses. Switching things round to the bias means that this edge is really stable, which also will give you a really neat one, because unless you want it, there's nothing worse than a baggy or wobbly wrap. We want that to be really tight, because it of course helps it fit it, the wrap edge. And on the masterclass on my website, I actually go through how you can make sure it stays nice and fitted as well, because of course it wraps around our chest area. For knitted styles, as I said, most of the time the straight of grain stays as it is, which means this edge is on the bias, which if you ever worked in any knitted fabric, you know that's really stretchy. So quite often you might have noticed that on a knitted fabric they add some sort of finishing, like a facing or ruffle, and then into the seam you always add some sort of stabilizer. That's old-fashioned ones. I've seen it with tape. I've also seen it use that see-through sticky tape, so it sticks nicely to your skin and doesn't drape. So there's lots of different variations, and of course if you're drafting your own pattern, you can start from scratch and the pattern hacks become design choices. If you're using an existing pattern, some of the options might be more appropriate than others, so that's when you're hacking the existing design, but they both work really well and you can have fun designing for both of them as well. So let's start with the actual bodices. And we're actually going to talk about 3 different bodice variation you might want to do. Of course, this knitted version, the bodice as such is completely flat. So if you have a sewing pattern, it will look like this in it. If you have a woven one, if it has a dart, it might look something like this. Quite often for woven patterns, what happens in the waist is that we actually disregard the waist seam, and when it's tight, it's basically just sweat a little bit wider, which gives you wiggle room for tightening it throughout the days, making it wider, adapting to your body. From a commercial perspective, of course, it's fantastic, because if you have a waist which is variable, it fits more people. But even if you make your own, having the waist slightly wider and then tightening it with a belt which wraps around twice just means you know it will be comfortable throughout the day. Or you could even elasticate the back waist slightly, which I know I'd go on a lot, but it's always fantastic. But this is the sort of main difference of the bodice patterns, which means we can pattern hack it in different ways. So we can add pleats, and of course for something like on a knitted fabric, the pleats would literally be either parallel or they would be actual sort of triangles. So something like this. If we add, I'm going to color the volume like this, then of course the final style looks something like this. So that's how you can really drastically change something which is skimming, body hugging, to something which is much more voluminous and has sort of a 3D detail. On a woven fabric, the same thing, of course, we can, instead of having a bustard and ease here, so if you have ease here, which as I mentioned before, we can easily then pivot both of them. And when we close this, and then again, we end up with the same pattern, but it actually does also the shaping. So it ends up looking the same, but it's still, it has a nice fit around here. And the volume, sorry, actually I drawn it wrong, completely wrongly, I apologize. It'd be more like this if we added more volume. So it'd be more at an angle like that. So it stays tightly around here and the volume is there. So we're basically pivoting with that. I've drawn that incredibly badly, I apologize. And I've got some lovely comments. And oh, hello Rebecca and Natalie saying, I use cotton twill tape to stabilize my necklines. Yes, so even for any necklines, cotton twill tape is fantastic, and it works for jerseys as well. Nowadays we have more alternatives, and if you look at commercial garments, if you look inside, you can find a variety of ways of stabilizing the neckline. Sometimes the facing is stabilized, sometimes the tape is used, but cotton twill tape, I think, is a classic for good reason. And Susanne is saying, the dress I made from the peplum blouse last summer, yeah, the peplum blouse is another tutorial on the website, is working well as wrap dress. Yes, and that is the great thing about wrap dresses. You can also of course use them as blouses or lengthen it. So if you have a pattern for a wrap top, for example, that can easily become a dress, and vice versa. Like I always think it's very sort of Donna Karan wrap blouses. I'm actually going to show one later on. So you can either have it as a dress style, or you can actually make a dress which looks like a top and skirt, or you can do a separate dress, skirts. Oh, but sorry, a separate shirt and skirt. Apologies, I've got a blocked up nose, and also I had 2 weeks off, which always means I'm slightly slow. Okay, let's have a look at another way of doing your bodice. So I've talked about the sort of classic one, which is darts, and it's also ease. Or of course it's knit, but that's just a shaped garment when you can add some volume, and often that's varied, so there might be a little bit of volume and still some shaping. There's lots of varieties of doing it. Let me have a look if I got images of that. Okay, so a good example is this one. So here's a really good example of a woven wrap dress, and you can see we've done exactly what I've done here. We've converted the dart shaping and waist shaping into pleats, and often we made them parallel to our wrap line to make it easier. So that's a really good way of doing it. Let's talk about gathers, which are sort of similar to pleats, but you can have I always think of pleats are quite controlled. They work well like that, and they can be stitched shut slightly as well to control them more. And then of course by contrast you can also have gathers. Here we go. So this is a really beautiful 1940s example, and it has lots of gathers. So for a style like that, you would actually have a lot more volume added. So up to now we stayed quite controlled, but especially if you use it working in like a nice thin silk jersey, which is of course what the original DVF dresses were made of in the 70s, silk jersey. You can have lots of fun draping. It's a bit what, you know, if you think of Madame Grès, all the draping she did, but there you can literally add quite often the volume is added parallel, so you can add lots of slash lines and then open it up, and you end up with a pattern which is much wider but is then gathered together, and that gives you a lovely gather lines, and it would mean the whole dress, rather than this is still fitted in the sort of shoulder and chest and bust area. This is a dress, a wrap dress, which is voluminous throughout. So that's where you really have to consider with the fabric you're using, how much you add. But it's a really nice, completely different style, and quite often that is contrasted by controlling it a little bit as well. So if you're adding all this volume, quite often we don't want it to become too voluminous. So quite often you can see on this one is a really good example. The volume is really cleverly controlled. So what they have done, you can see on the, if I draw it out, that's basically the dress. Oh, that's really badly drawn. I'm just going to draw the basic outline because I wanted, it's like this, isn't it? What they've done is they've added a yoke here, which means the gathers don't come straight from the shoulder but further down, so that really controls it, because it means it's still fitted around the shoulder. Otherwise you get a really springy shoulder line, and that can be really nice. Like Claire McCardle quite often did a lovely swan or grown-on collar neckline, and then she had one or two pleats, which just gives you a little bit of softness. So it's like a draped scarf detail, like you're draping something around your neck. So that's really delicate and lovely. But if you have, for example, completely gathered shoulder and you start up here, it's sort of very much puffing out. So we're moving it slightly lower down the bodice. It's slightly more controlled. So it works. It's a really good, it's like a really simple trick, but even if you have an, for example, existing pattern and it has that detail, like a vintage sewing pattern, and it looks a bit over top, just basically on your pattern, close your gathers up, chop a bit off and glue it to the back. So you're basically creating a yoke, you're just moving the volume further down. It will make all the difference. You wouldn't think so, but it amazingly does. So that's a really good way of controlling the gathers. And another way, if you look at the close sleeveless dress, it's doing it in lots of different ways. So again, rather than the wrap going all the way to the side seam or just finishing to nothing, they're actually having moving at an angle. So you've got a right angle here, and then again the gathers is done here. And then of course we've got the same on the, this is actually quite, this is an interesting wrap dress because it's like this. So it wraps, it's like a panel wrapping over. So it looks like that. And then the other side, again, it wraps underneath it like this. So it's a variation of a gathered dress, or of a gathered wrap dress. But you can see how it's actually really controlled. And then, of course, we've got like a panel skirt. And again, you've got this angle here, which again, it sort of controls it rather than just having a straight waist with all the gathers. By having that sort of angle, it really focuses the gathers where you want them. So it's a little bit more advanced, but it does work really well. Let me have a look whether I've got a, no, I thought I had another Claire McCardle, but I don't. So let's sort of consider for the bodice, for pattern hacking, if you have like both of these are sort of basic patterns I saw online. You can easily, you know, add a little bit of 3D detail for pleats. You can go more full on with gathers. And then of course you can control with gathers as well. And also to consider about whether you have, because as I said, a lot of patterns just have extra ease. And when you organically tie the wrap dress. However, if you say, actually, I don't want that because I find it when I have to tie it really tight, which is something I actually don't like for some wrap dresses, but for them to sit nicely, you have to have a really spider, sorry. You have to have a really tight waist, otherwise it doesn't sit nicely. So what you can actually in that case do, you can take out the ease and just have little gathers. And then, for example, instead of you can have an ornamental tie here, and then you can have a button on the other side, so it's actually a fully fitted dress. And if you combine it with a slightly elasticated waist, it's still really comfortable. And a lot of the Claire McCardell styles quite often don't have, some of them have ties, but quite often a lot of them have buttons, because that's actually means you can have it not as tight fitting as you want to. And Natalie's saying that's such a good idea to use a yoke to control the gathers. Yeah, when I saw it, I had to share it with you because it was really clever. And Natalie's saying, on the gathered dress, where do you think the closure is? So this one is actually a little bit of a cheats wrap dress, because I'm pretty sure that has got a center back opening and a center back closure. So it's purely ornamental. And that's sort of if you see a dress like that or a vintage sewing pattern, and you're hoping to recreate it, or you're thinking of buying it, if it's something like that where you can't quite figure out how to get in and out, then a lot of the time it's actually fake, because on this dress it'd be really hard. It's basic to get the wrap to work. It would require lots of closures. So it's actually, what it is a it's a panel dress like that. Properly, I'm just trying to, I think this actually might even have, it might be a dress like that underneath, and then it's got the closure at the center back, and then it has our panels which move like this, and it's got a seam here, and then we just have like the panels which sort of wrap on top of it, and which are completely ornamental. And they might even be it could be stitched to the undergarment, but I've seen it before where it's literally just a ornamental detail, which works really well. And then of course the under slip dress as such, it's actually like that, the under slip dress is holds it all together, so the base of the dress acts like a foundation garment, so it sits really well. And hello Jen, no worries, glad you could join me. I think I'm double booked with you. You always it's like always the awkward time of day for us here in the UK, because you're put in the middle of meetings. So thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Okay, let's have a look at, this has gotten quite complicated, so let's have a look at a really easy way of hacking these garments, which is necklines and collars. Let's start with collars first, because that's really straightforward. And then with neckline options, we can actually go into a little bit more detail. So if you have a wrap dress you've drafted yourself, or if you have a sewing pattern like this, and there's quite a few out there I've seen, then you can easily add collars. And the collars I would add would be something like a shawl collar. And a shawl collar, of course, you know I love a shawl collar. It's really easy, because all you do is on your existing sewing pattern or on your existing drafting pattern, you just do your normal shawl collar construction, and I will show you one, for example. So this is quite a nice one, because it's a really wide neckline, and this might be the shawl collar construction, in which case you just draft it on like that, Or of course, if you want a collar which sits completely flat, what you might do is a separate sailor collar or roll collar construction. So you can always do that. The sailor collar, oh sorry, I've just realized that it's obscuring it slightly. Here we go. A short collar, there's a tutorial of course on YouTube. It's really quick and works well for slightly higher necklines. And then for something like this, I would probably use a separate sailor collar, which works very similar, but allows you a little bit more room for playing around with the fit. And there's tutorials for the sailor collar and why it's such a great collar on the website, of course. And let's have a look at a different collar, which is this one. And I really like that. Let me see, I can zoom in slightly. Because earlier I said the great thing with wrap dresses is that it can easily become tops, or of course a top can become a dress, or it can be a dress pretending to be a top. And this one could be either. It could be a top and a skirt, or it could be actually a dress which is pretending to be a two-piece outfit. Either way it would work fine. But what's really nice about this, what they've done, is they sort of quoted shirt styles. So we've got a collar, we've got, I would call this an open collar. You can use your open collar construction, or of course if you wanted slightly tighter fitting, you could use a shirt collar construction as well. And there's tutorials for both, and also on how to fit them on the website, or you might already know how to do it. But what I love is that styles like that, you can literally quote the shirt style. So it's got the classic sleeves of a shirt, and then all it is, it's slightly different from all the patterns we've looked at so far, is in that you properly have a neckline like this, and then instead of a straight button stand, it's just, it might even be slightly angled. It might be something like this. So straight, a diagonal line becoming straight at the top. But that gives you the really nice detail where here it's sort of roughly a normal button stand width, and you have a button when you can put in your collar, and then of course, because it's an open collar, it sort of lays open. And then you can still have a really nice little tie detail. And it's actually probably not that much longer than the center front. So I think I would use my relaxed bodice to draft this. So the block without the darts, where the dark darts have been moved into ease, and then you can literally just do your normal one, and then you can sort of, at the top you would just have your have your normal button stand width, and then it's probably just very gently going out slightly, and then it's just, this is probably, I would probably, on this one I would change into little gathers and then put in a waistband and then tie it. So it's gathered in sort of at the back, at that point where it wraps, but the rest is actually quite constructed. And then of course you could easily then have your skirt attached like that, and then here you could just have an invisible zip. So it could be like both a really clever shirt wrap dress or a two-piece solution. Either one would look really nice. And Natalie says, I like the button detail to hold it close to the top. Yes, that's what drew me to it, because that's what I know. I think I'm not the only one who struggles with the fact that actually, I think it's probably more problem the sports pattern wrap dresses. It's always like really hard to find something which works for you every day, which is actually contoured nicely around your chest area, so that if you move. We're not suddenly bagging open. And also it's exactly the height you wanted, whether it's lower or higher. But if it's wrong, it won't work. And of course, it might also show off your bra and stuff and not actually do its function. So nice thing is about whether you're using a sewing pattern, you can move it around to suit you. You can move it up and down slightly easily. If you're drafting your own, of course, you can have exactly the wrap you want to and contour it exactly to your fit. And I think that commercially, that's why Jersey with Diane from Fürstenberg was such a revelation, because that can be wrapped quite nicely and neatly. And you notice a lot of the Claire McCardle styles, she doesn't have a low wrap. They're probably 90% quite high wrap, because that means it will just work throughout the day. But if you have something like let me find this one again, something like this one, for example, that will have to be really fitted. So I think this is a sewing pattern. So again, somebody back then would have made it. And something like the one I showed you just now, again, actually you can see that doesn't fit very well, which is of course always fascinating. When you see something, you can see all around the area here, it's actually quite loose, which of course looks quite nice. It can look quite sculptural, but then it probably, for it to actually look great, you would either have to construct something like that on a corset base. So the corset holds everything in place, and that can be quite loose and it basically floats nearly. And Alexander McQueen has done quite a lot of styles like that, where you have these big collars, but they sort of float. Because otherwise, if you wanted this to be really fitted, you would have to draft it yourself or adapt a sewing pattern, because I think commercially to buy that would be really hard unless you're exactly the figure it was drafted for. And Natalie says you would need a corset to keep this on. Yeah, so it's exactly like that. So if you wanted to draft this for day wear, the shoulder, can you see it's here? That would drop off. So for day wear, you could do something like this, because that's actually hitting exactly probably where your corset is. And that's probably not even day wear, that's evening wear as well. But this, if you're basically in here, then you can have it really nicely fitted. Otherwise, it's just always going to slide off. And Jen is saying, talking about this one, the sleeves look too loose. I love the idea. Yeah, I think this is where you can just see either it's actually not her size, and she stood very still and hoped nothing would slide down while it was photographed, which is what I think. But if you I don't actually know whether this is couture, this is sewing pattern, whatever, because you can see the bodice itself is really tight. So I would imagine maybe some sort of undergarment. And then of course the sleeves, if you don't have stretch fabric, if you make them too tight, it's actually really hard to move. So these sleeves, again, to be really fitted, you actually, again, it would then probably pull on there. So to get the garment like that, exactly like this, without lots of foundation garments and clever under construction, maybe even like a really tight strap here on the undergarment holding it all together, which is then stitched and holds on, it will be a complete disaster. So something like that is actually slightly more complicated. So for this one, let's just look at the collar rather than trying to I think to recreate it, that would go past pattern like an existing pattern, and you would probably have to draft this yourself. But it's a beautiful style. It's a contrast between that really wide neckline and everything else is sort of quite structured, isn't it? Okay, let's go back to the table. So we talked collars. Let's have a look at neckbands. And they're a fantastic way of quickly updating any existing wrap dress. So if you have a wrap dress like this, you can easily add details. So one thing would be to add a flounce, and it always seems a bit too straightforward, but it works really well on both woven and knit dresses. And basically all it is, you cut out your usual flounce like this, something like that. And then you just stitch the inner edge to it and you get that lovely dress like that. And I had a beautiful black jersey dress like that out of a really nice fluid jersey, and I had this style. And it just adds, like for day dresses, it just adds a little bit of detail, and especially in the same color. And then of course you can either have you can just attach both the layers to the facing, or another really nice detail is to have binding. So you got a binding edge and then you got the flounce. And again, of course, the great thing about the binding is you can add the tape in there, so it's really secure. So that's a really great way of doing it. And then another way of changing something like that is to actually add, I'm just trying to think, like a band. I was going to call it facing, but it's not a facing. And that works really well if you, for example, using a print fabric. So the classic one would be just to have a facing here, so it's invisible. If you swap that facing with a band, it looks like this. And you can see that gives you that sort of block detail, which looks completely different. And then of course you can also have that same band on your waistband like this. And then you can even have it on the sleeve cuff, the same width everywhere. And if you wanted to even, this is a very short dress, you could have it on the cuffs and also going down, the hem and going down. And that way, if you, for example, have a nice flower jersey, you can actually edge it in like a plain fabric, and it just gives you a really nice, it's quite a, is it a 60s? I always think it's quite 60s. It gives you, like, highlights all the design lines, so you can have fun of it. Or of course you could do it all on the same fabric, on either woven or straight, but it just structures everything a bit more. And it's of course a really nice way of finishing if you made this out of silk, and then you have all the just the same color silk bands, then you can easily interface them or interline them slightly and sort of just stabilize all the edges. So if you have like a skirt which is a bit too flowing away, if you add that, it adds a bit of weight and structure. So it's a really good way of doing it. The next thing, of course, you can change, which again is really straightforward, but it will work really well, is your waistline. And I do have an image because I watched Pride and Prejudice. So this is the Pride and Prejudice film with Keira Knightley, which is not as good as the TV series, but still enjoyable. But can you see, because this is a Regency, Georgian Regency period, so they got the Empire line, but they've done it with a wrap dress, and I actually don't know how historically accurate it is. And I'm sure maybe Natalie knows. I should look it up. But even if it isn't accurate, it's still a pretty detail we can use. So what you can easily do is, if you're drafting yourself, you can just change the waistline when you're drafting it. If you're using a sewing pattern, I will actually make it as it is before first, and then on your trowel you can actually then decide, first of all, how does it fit, like is there ease there in this area, before you take it off. So when you take it off, you have to sort of be aware what happens here. Is there ease in there? Will it become less ease? All these sort of things. But you can, that's what it basically looks like. So you can either have a style like this, and it can be, you know, it can be functional, or often again maybe have a side seam if a neckline is big enough. Another really beautiful detail, if you're talking non-functional, is, for example, you can have it like a wrap which goes nearly at the bottom, and you can have an insert like that. So again, that works really nice with Empire line. And then the last one is to actually turn it more well, it's not really a wrap dress, but you can have it also like this is shaped, a sectional wrap dress, sorry. You can have it a slightly shaped one as well if you wanted to, but that doesn't work with wrap. I was just thinking, I've got a wrap dress with that detail, but I think it's a fake. I will have to look at it. And Natalie's saying is the bodice would need to be have a higher waistline to be more historically accurate. Yes, all of Keira Knightley's waistlines are very low. I did notice it. It was very strange with that film. The other one is much better with that. But just by moving a waistline, or as we talked, the 1940s one, which again is fake, but can you see that sort of shaping when the waistline again, it makes all the difference. We quickly have one quick, there we go. Oh, this is something else. I thought it was. Okay, so that's the waistline. The other thing, of course, which you can easily change is the skirt. And the classic skirt, of course, is probably a plain skirt, like, normal skirt. It's probably something like that on a lot of sewing patterns, and if you draft it yourself, or a panel skirt. But you can have lots of fun with, rather than having it straight, you can have it like a flounce again, which looks completely different, which Zana, of course, was talking about. Or another option as well is to add, again, you can add a shaped style, maybe even with a band, which looks different again. Or what I really like is like the 1940s one, and also the one with the shawl collar, with the open collar, is to maybe add a panel skirt. And you can easily change the normal skirt by just chopping it into two if you have a sewing pattern, and that way you can add more volume as well. But there's lots of that's a really quick way of changing it. And of course, if you, for example, want to completely change the look, as long as you know a waist measurement, where it sits on you, you can add a different skirt. So you could also have, you don't want the skirts to have really, really tight, but you can have a slightly more straight skirt, and then maybe have a, like a detail like this, where you have a little bit of a gather there. So that's the opposite. And there's a really nice, if I just have a quick look for it. There's quite a few contemporary skirts I saw with that detail. Oh, here we go. So something like that. Can you see that's the sort of detail where it's straighter, and then it's got that sort of detail. With things like that, again, you will have to work out whether this is actually a real wrap, in which case it can't be skinned. If you make it really tight, you do be flashing a lot of leg every time you move. So you might want to make that fake, or have maybe like at least maybe a button here or two, just to hold it in place. It's always with anything wrap related, it's always the balance between cover and bulk. We don't want it to wrap around too often because it would add bulk, but if you do it too little, it basically becomes very you're showing a lot of leg, which might be what you want to, of course, or it might not be, and you have to draft it accordingly. And that's especially important for skirt part, dress part, the top part not so much. And on the website there's a whole tutorial on the drafting principles for wrap dresses, which goes into the whole balance between closure and bulk. And Natalie's saying you have to be careful if the wind is blowing. Yes. And I was thinking, I've got a beautiful 1960s dress which has this one, which confused me, where the back is a wrap, and it's too small now, but whenever I used to wear it, especially if you in the front, you sort of know what happens, but if you have a wrap at the back, you're constantly like thinking, oh my god, what's happening? And And that also had the issue that the wrap wasn't deep enough, so it was constantly opening up. And because your bum is more curvy, it's actually more of an issue at the back. So it's something to consider. Okay, let's finish off with some closures. And of course, the most classic one is a tie. But I wanted to show you a really nice Claire McCardle closure. And she quite often used these hooks, or of course you can use also buttons. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So a normal wrap dress would just have a tie here, which means your wrap is always something like that, because you have to meet into like your tie point. So it's quite a small wrap. Well, Claire McCardle did, she replaced the tie with buttons or these beautiful hooks she had made, and that means you can quite securely fasten it. So something like this dress would have a button stand inside, which would get fastened here with maybe some little loops and tiny buttons or hooks, and then you have another row of hooks here, and that actually means the whole thing is really secure, which means you don't have to make it super skin tight, which you have to do with it when you tie your wrap dress to hold it in place, and it just stays the same. So it's a lot more controls. It's a really nice version. And what I've done on here as well, and the full tutorial is on, there's a I think a really big drafting tutorial for everything, and then a full-on construction tutorial as well. But this actually it's not an open wrap dress, it's a normal skirt. The skirt is one part. Sorry, it's very wrinkly. And then basically the pocket acts as your wrap, so you step into it and then you close it up. And that's a really clever way of doing it. And Beth is just saying bye. I'm glad you liked it, bye. You liked it, Beth, and thank you for joining me. And Miss J is saying, yes, especially if your hips take up a lot of fabrics and you haven't got enough wrap over. Yeah, and I think it's that commercially companies always, that's where they save like their 10 pence by using slightly less fabric. Which, if you produce 1,000 garments, that makes quite a lot of difference. But of course for us it's really annoying, which is of course the great thing, as I always say, if you're making your own, you get to have garments which actually work and you can just live in. That's what I love about drafting my own. Everything works for me rather than other people. And I wanted to show you one last thing, which for closures and to finish off and to go full on complicated. And I can turn the table off for this. But this is a Charles James dress from the Met. He had made 2 of them and they're slightly different. This I think is an evening dress. And can you see, it looks like a really classic wrap dress, but in typical Charles James, this is like a prototype. But I actually think he might have overcomplicated things a little bit, because so it has like a wrap dress here, and then it's got a really nice closure. It's again like 3 big hooks, really clever and probably custom made. But if you open it up, and I'm gonna zoom it in. Sorry, technology. Can you see it's actually a separate blouse? So you basically close your wrap blouse across, and then you wrap your skirt part around it, and the blouse tucks in at the back. So you close your blouse, and then you still have a really long skirt, and then you wrap it around your whole back and around your whole front again, and then you hook it in. And I'll put a link on it because there's lots of images on the Met homepage. But it's sort of like, this is how far you can, like, it doesn't have to be a typical dress. You can actually just completely change it. And the look there, of course, would be much more like a skirt and a blouse separate, but it's all wrapped together. So I thought it was really clever. And also, again, somebody who didn't just look, oh yeah, wrap dress is that. He just thought, oh yeah, I want that look. And how can you do without, you literally just wrap it around it. And the great thing, it was made out of a wool knit, which meant it could be, like it could be sold en masse in the department stores, you know, like a flat pack t-shirt, because you could fold it completely. And again, for traveling, like you, the whole garment folds flat really nicely. And Natalie says it's really good engineering, and I've never seen this design. Yes, I think it's because it's not as glamorous as some of his big petal dresses, but I really like a lot of his staywear. It's really clever. And there's also something called the taxi dress, which I'm going to link as well, which has it's a wrap dress again, and it's got trouser leg inside. So it's for getting in and out of taxis without flashing your leg, as you will with a wrap dress. So I saw a really clever ideas, and just to show you, you know, we can do little pattern hacks and completely change your look. And 99% of the time, that's all we need to get a new great dress. But you can then also think of pushing it exactly how you want it. Anyway, that's all for me from today. I hope you enjoyed this foray into easier pattern hacks and maybe slightly more complicated 1940s and Charles James ones. And I will be back next week. I know I had 2 weeks off, but I'm back for the rest of June. So enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and thank you so much for watching me, joining me, watching. Thanks. And next week I hopefully be less cold and maybe more on the ball. And Natalie's saying it's a taxi dress, the one with the zipper. I'm not sure. I will put a link in it. I just remember the trouser leg. And Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me. And bye, Suzanne. Enjoy the rest of your time in Rome.